You're fed up with the 9 to 5. You've been working hard for years and you're just not seeing the results you want. You want to break free from the traditional career but don't know how. Business Breaks is here to help. Hello everyone, this is the Business Breaks podcast and I'm your host, Dante Healy. So I'm very excited to be interviewing David Safir, who is a global recognized expert in cash flow optimization, as well as the founder and CEO of the Cash is Clear learning system. And this educates and advises accountants and CFOs on cash flow and profit maximization strategies for their clients. David teaches accountants how to grow their revenue with cash flow advisory services through the Cash Flow Advisory Certification Program, as well as mastermind groups. As an expert in cash flow maximization, he is quoted in hundreds of news stories, spoken to audiences internationally, and appeared on dozens of podcasts and various television outlets. There is a popular expression amongst finance professionals: revenue is vanity, profit is sanity, and cash is reality. And this is why I'm super excited to dive deeper into the subject of cash flow optimization during this interview. David, welcome to Business Breaks.
Dante, thank you so much. I'm really glad to be here with you today.
And thank you so much. A pleasure to have you on the show. So to start off, David, can you please share your backstory with our listeners? How did your career develop from being an IT specialist, if I'm not wrong, to a leading advisor in cash flow for business?
You're right. I started out my career at a manufacturing company that I was fortunate was my father's. And he said it was the beginning of the PC revolution and he needed somebody. And I didn't know what I was doing, but nobody else did either. So I got to learn from the grounds up how to install PCs and DOS-based programs, etc. And I kept going and ended up with Unix programming. But that was more of a skill, technical skill that I acquired to do a job, and it wasn't really my passion. I went to business school for international business, which was my real passion. And I took an entrepreneurship generalist approach without focusing too much. I actually took entrepreneurship my second quarter and TA'd the third quarter. I was only there, was able to get out in 3 quarters or 3 semesters. And I was able to get into the international business environment and rose up from sales and marketing, but I used that technical skill because I was in technical sales and got into marketing and then into more of a global marketing position. And then I was very fortunate that I had a boss who moved from company to company. He brought me with him and finally said, "David, I need help at Kodak." And I said, "Great, put me in charge of Latin America." And he did. So that's where I was able to dive in deep. And I ended up becoming the vice president general manager for a division within Latin America. But as a general manager, you need to be responsible for the profit and loss. So everything from revenue down to the profitability. And that included your pricing models, your service models, your cost controls. So I got familiar how to play with a whole bunch of different levers and then was hired as the president and general manager for a wholly owned subsidiary of a company, but the Latin America subsidiary. So now it really was my company that I was running. And it was the same thing. Now, the one thing we never worried about was cash flow because it was big, large corporations. We worried about collections, accounts receivable, but that's not equal to cash flow. There's so many other things involved. And along that time, people started asking me for advice. They knew that I was in business. I started doing consulting work on the side. And I did it. I mean, this has been 20 years now plus. 2002 when I formed my company. So we had an anniversary this year. And I wanted to specialize. I got out of the corporate world and I've been doing this. In 2018, I'm going, what can I specialize in? So it's general consulting, which is hard to do marketing with. People want to know what you do, how you do it. And I realized every single client that I was working with had cash flow issues. We didn't call it cash flow issues. It was sales issues. It was expense issues. It was inventory issues all over the place. And I realized that's where I wanted to specialize. And I hyper-focused down into cash. And when I did that, the first thing I said was, well, let me go see what's written about it. Who else is doing this? And what I found was people were writing 5 things to control your cash, 7 things. If you're lucky, you got 10 things. And I was like, this is crazy. I can probably think of 99 ways to control and manage your cash. And I got to 99. I kept going. And my list has now grown to 195 strategies and tactics that companies can use to manage their cash flow and then optimize and maximize their cash flow.
Wow, that's a valuable skill to have, especially in these times with the end of what we call almost free money now. And companies are having to tighten up their balance sheets and actually focus on being profitable rather than just growing revenues. Because back in the day, in the last several years, especially if you're an IT company, you didn't have to worry about being profitable. It was all about revenue growth, and you could get the cash from external investors. Now it's not that easy. And yeah, it's definitely creating a knock-on effect. But coming back to your background, I saw on your LinkedIn profile, when you referred to your dad's company, it was, at the time you joined, it was a struggling business, but you turned it around, and it was through focusing on the cash shortages your business had. So
Well, okay, so let me clarify. I didn't turn anything around. My dad did it.
All
Right.
right.
And but if I can just, what they did, they had a 1-page spreadsheet. You didn't have these multi-page spreadsheets. It was very simple: addition, subtraction, move to the next week. And they were able to manage that company, get extended credit because they had a cash flow plan until they profitably sold the company after a couple of years of significant struggles. So that's a type of turnaround, as you get to sell the company instead of going out of business.
Thanks for clarifying that. And the reason I got so excited is because my background, I mean, I'm working in IT now for finance companies, but as a junior accountant, when I first started my career, I joined a company that was struggling with profitability. It was a manufacturing company. They were unable to pay suppliers on time. So we were always getting phone calls in the accounts payable department where they were just chasing us. Why haven't you paid us? You're 90 days plus overdue. And one of the actions we needed to take was to forecast our cash flows on a daily basis, including the collections, etc. And it worked, but it seems going forward in my career that a lot of businesses only pay attention to cash flows when they're in financial trouble. And what are the most commonly held myths you see regarding cash flow management?
You know, you sort of mentioned one a little while ago, and that was people could just sell more. So one of the myths is, and you see it all the time, increase your cash flow. I'll teach you how to increase your cash flow through selling more. And I just sit there and I mean, it's false advertising. It is possible if you have the right business model, high margins, and you get paid up front, or you have zero cost to deliver. Information products, for example, there's literally zero cost to add on a client. Even if they pay 30, 60, 90 days down the road, all sales are good. Other than that, you end up needing to invest money generally before you get cash or before you get all of your cash. And so, huge myth out there that all sales are good and that they will generate cash flow. They will eventually, but most businesses, if you're a service-based business where you have to pay people, if you're a production-based business where you have to produce things, it will require money to get the money, and you could be out of pocket 30, 45, 60 days before you actually get paid. So that's myth number one. I'm going to stick to sales. Myth number two is all revenue is good revenue, and the client is always right. Those are combined. I've got a saying that says, fire your loser clients. Now, not personal. Nobody's a loser, right? We're not talking personal here. We're talking about, and I don't know if this is a video recording or not, but I'm going to describe what I'm doing. I'm pulling out my wallet and pulling out a wad of bills, and I'm going to hand this to you, Dante, and say, here you go. You're my client. I'm going to give you money every month because you're costing me money. Even though you're giving me money, I'm spending more on you as a client than you're giving to me. So you're one of my loser clients because I'm losing money. And that's just a myth that's got to go away. that the clients are always right. If you're not making money, and money is not just the cash, it's also time. And I've talked
Mm.
to accountants, I've talked to business people, I've talked to everybody about this, and they go, yes, it's not just money, it's these clients that are negative, it's the clients that suck up all my time. So you're missing opportunity cost because they're the complainers, the ones they don't pay enough and they complain. Those have to be either fixed. You can fix some of these relationships, but if you can't, they need to go away. So there's another myth. Myth number 3, you only need to worry about cash flow when times are bad. It's the last time you want to worry about. You want to worry about it before there's a problem. It falls in line with the axiom, this is a true myth or true saying, banks only want to lend you money when you do not need it. That is 100% true. You want to worry about your cash flow before you need it, before you're having problems. Why? Because then it's not a worry. It's a system, it's a process. 15 to 30 minutes a week is what it would take for an accounting team to put together a cash flow model, update it. And then it literally can take 5 or 10 minutes for executives, a business owner to look and say, yeah, I'm in good shape, or wait a minute, we're going to have a problem in a month or 2 months or 3 months. Let's do something today when we're sane. And guess what? A bank will lend us money today because they don't know we're going to have an issue in 2 months or 3 months. Okay. So worry about it now. The problem is, you asked me what are the top myths. I could talk about this the entire show. Pay slowly. No, pay fast and get a discount. If you've got the cash, you can save 10, 15, 20% or more by paying up front if you've got the cash. Hey, how about collect money as fast as you can? Well, wait a minute, time out. What if they're a good credit risk and you could be earning interest if you don't need the cash because you're managing it properly? Charge them more. Say, you know what? It's $100 today, or make 3 easy payments of $40 each over the next 3 months. That's what the late night TV infomercials are all about, right?
Yeah.
They're not stupid. They're not being nice people. They're saying, I want to make more money. Pay me slow, but give me more money. So anyhow, lots of myths to be blown up when it revolves around cash flow.
Brilliant. Thank you. And that last one is very, very interesting, because you're becoming a financer and you're earning interest on those late payments if you can manage it and set it up so it's cheaper, it's cost effective to run. Definitely.
Yeah, but you could actually do interest arbitrage in the example I just gave. 20% increase in 3 months. Well, that's equivalent to an 80% increase over the course of a year. So if you can find somebody to lend you money for less than 80%, which don't even come close to that. If you can find somebody right at a reasonable interest rate, that you're borrowing your cash flow, but it's offset by these increases in margin, because that's all pure profit. Yeah. That's not just cash flow. There's no expense except for if you borrow the money. So but again, this is proactive cash flow modeling and proactive cash flow optimization, maximization strategies. You can't do this when you've got the problem, which is when most people start going, oh, I better look at my cash flow.
I mean, I'm mind blown at the moment. And as an ex-accountant, I should know this stuff. It's really crazy. But it's not just about the numbers. It's not just about money. It's about commercial awareness. So for the sorry, go on.
No, you just mentioned 2 more myths. Yeah. Myth number 1, that accountants should know this, and I'll get back to that. And myth number 2, it's all about the money. Yeah. Right. So let's talk about myth number 2. When a business owner has a problem, they look at the finance group and go, what the hell's going on? Fix it. But it's not that. It's sales, it's marketing, it's operation, it's the business owner themselves is oftentimes the biggest challenge. So that's myth number 1, or number 2 broken. Myth number 1 that you mentioned is perhaps the biggest myth in the whole world, which is that accountants learn this stuff or should know it. And it's not. What did you learn how to do in school when you learned accounting? I'll give you a hint. And which direction were you looking? Backwards or forwards?
We were looking at the past, of course. Yeah.
It's all historic. Cash flow, you might be able to analyze the past, but what we're talking is proactivity, and it's
Mm.
future and predicting and managing the future and creating your future. And accountants, respectfully, are not taught that. And yet there's this myth out there that my accountant will understand it.
Yeah, yeah. And when one of my first bosses, they proudly said, we don't worry about forecasts. We deal in facts. But at the same time, you craft your future, right? In
It,
forecasting and planning.
it it's because that's what accountants are taught, bookkeepers are
Mm,
taught, and it's not their fault.
mm,
There's a gap in the marketplace
mm,
because finance people learn how to do the forecasting stuff to a certain degree, but I'm not sure how well they know how to analyze the past. And to do good cash flow, you're putting them together. And so that's where I'm trying to bridge that gap. And so the people I'm teaching are finance, certain degree to finance people. There's one person who's an inventory person. There's some
mm.
CFOs, but they're mostly bookkeepers and accountants. And they say the exact same thing when I'm talking to them. David, I'm tired of handing clients reports and them saying, I need help and not being able to help them. I want to help them. I don't know how.
Yeah,
That's the goal, is being able to help companies, because when you help the companies, you help the owners and you help them stay in business. That happens, there's the multiplier effect of all those employees, all those families, all the suppliers, all the customers that are impacted by business failures. And that's the reason I do this, is to decrease the number of business failures and then on the positive side, help companies grow as much as they can and not be the profitable company who goes out of business because of cash flow issues.
incredible. And it makes so much sense when I think about all these companies with otherwise competent accountants that still manage to go under, and you think, how could that happen? And again, for non-finance listeners out there who assume that a qualified accountant would already know everything necessary to be an expert in managing cash flow, David, you've just outlined quite a few key points there. Is there anything else that you cover when you have to teach accountants how to best help their clients with these cash flow problems they experience?
One of I've put together a system. It has six
Mm,
pillars. The first pillar that we have to keep coming back to and coming back to and coming back to is mindset, to
mm,
shift them from looking backwards to looking forwards, to get off of accrual based accounting reports onto cash based reality.
mm.
I mean, what you said at the beginning with cash is reality.
Yeah.
And so that's why I call it cash is clear
Mm,
learning systems, is because it provides clarity that you can't get out of accounting systems. And so it's shifting the mindset is the biggest issue. We just had a mastermind, and my wife sits in. We're in business together. She's my business partner. She has read everything I've written for the last 4 years, and she knows this stuff, the theory at least, better than like anybody else in the world, maybe except for me. But certainly my material. And we're in the middle of a mastermind doing an analysis of just QuickBooks sample data. And I'm going, there's a problem with what we're looking at, guys and ladies and gentlemen. There's a problem. And I just sit and said, all right, I'll give you a hint. It's staring you in the face. Nothing. And my wife's in the background going, it's accrual based accounting. You can't do it based on it was an accrual based
mm,
report. And we at least needed to shift over to cash. And then you still have issues with cash based accounting because it doesn't
mm.
show up. There's certain things that don't show up neither on a balance sheet nor on a P&L. And don't even get me started with the statement of cash flows, trying to use that as a real tool.
Yeah, it's all backward looking, thinking about it, and you can't really judge anything. It's more for regulatory reporting and accounting to owners and also
Shareholders.
other stakeholders. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. It's opaque. I like to use that term. I mean, well, I think personally, for many small businesses, accrual based accounting is opaque, like you can't see through it, opaque.
Yeah.
And cash basis is okay, it's fuzzy. but at least you can get some visibility.
Yeah.
And the best way to do it is just take a P&L and switch between accrual and cash-based accounting, and the numbers are wildly different for certain
Mm.
companies.
Mind blown. And I think in terms of that, coming back to that mindset, you said it's a critical. It's actually sounds like it's foundational for any professional who's interested in mastering their cash flow, and the importance of applying that creativity and forward-thinking proactiveness to the process. I love it, but how I can imagine also it must confuse traditional accountants who are trained and almost regimented to think and act and behave in a certain way. How do you get them out of that spiral, shall we say? And, you know, also, the word creative and accounting don't mesh well together, but it's not the same concept. But how do you elaborate and explain it in a way that they can grasp and move forward with it?
That's a great question. So first of all, let me tell you what the second step is, or
Mm,
it really is a second step. And the other ones are they're not necessarily sequential. And
mm,
that's bookkeeping. So it's not like I think that this is a bad thing. No, we really need great bookkeepers. We need accountants to do the adjusting journals, entries,
mm,
and all the other great stuff. You have a really clean set of books because that's your basis for understanding what your costs are, your margins are, all the goodness that has to come out to be able to predict cash flow going down the future, your average days accounts receivable, average days accounts payable, all that good stuff. Okay. That being said, now let's shift over to how do you change the mindset? Well, it takes time. And we have regular breakthroughs where during the middle of a mastermind meeting, somebody will go, I never thought of it like that. But the communication process is, and anybody can read some of these articles. Now, I've turned these articles into exercises for my coursework, but you go to my LinkedIn profile and David Safir, David Safeer, you can look me up. You probably spelled it out in the show notes, and go look at the articles I've written. Now, I mentioned that my wife has read everything. She didn't just read it, she edited everything. And when she didn't understand it, we would reword it. She's not an accountant, she's not a bookkeeper, she is not quite a layperson. So it's in plain English. It's so anybody can understand it. And so you might say, but wait a minute, these are accountants, but it's like, but yeah, that's true. But the accountants need to understand in plain English what we're talking about. And just I'll give you another one. The article is called Keep Digging if you want to know what the real problem is, right? Because that's another mindset. With accounting, you sort of end up with black and white. There's that joke, the best accountant is when you ask what's 1 + 1, they ask you what do you want it to be?
yeah.
Yeah, okay, that's some people don't find that funny at all, but mostly it's fairly within a limited constraints. All right, let's put it that way. Versus all over the place. And so you've got to keep digging and say, well, I'll give you an example. The guy has too much inventory. I said, why did you buy so much inventory? You didn't even sell last year's. Why'd you buy so much this year? Well, because you get 2% discount if you hit the platinum level. I said, okay, but it's killing your cash flow. Why did
Mhm.
you didn't need the 2% discount? So why did you take the 2% discount? Well, I've got to get platinum level. Well, why do you need to get platinum level? Well, so the sticker goes on the door. And so why is that? Because the competitor down the road has a platinum sticker. So I want to compete with him. And I said, do your customers really care that you're a platinum dealer instead of a gold dealer? And do they know that you're platinum? And when we really talked to him, I said, no, they don't know. And you're right, David, they probably wouldn't care. So what's the real cause of his cash flow issues? If the issue is inventory, why does he really have so much? It's ego.
Mm. That's
So
powerful.
go ahead. Sorry, I'll stop.
No, no, no. Sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off on your flow, but I was just going to jump on it. It's a vanity metric, and again, getting the right KPIs is critical. Sorry, but yeah.
Yeah, and no, it's okay because I could keep going and going, and I don't want to do that. But it brings up another subject: is
Mm,
I recommend to all the people I work with, this is not. You said it yourself. This is not a financial issue.
Mm,
and it's generally an emotional issue. But if you're in cash flow crunch, it's definitely an emotional issue. But
mm,
then it's usually behavioral based processes that are happening within a company. And so I recommend to people they go out and get coaching training. I took what's it called? Life coaching, not business coaching. I took a life coaching course online, Udemy, loved it. And I got my certificate. It's on my wall because I'm really proud of it because I realize most of what I'm dealing with is human behaviors and emotions, which is more of a life coaching issue than it is any kind of aspect of business.
that's something that I haven't heard before. So at least not in finance, and that's. But it's looking back, it's so true. It's a lot of decisions are made based on psychology, and there's a certain amount of emotion attached to decisions. So mastering your
Well,
emotions is key.
but look back at the companies you've worked at,
Mm,
or the company you're working at today, and say to yourself, how often do you say that doesn't make any sense? I
mm,
mean, from a business perspective, it doesn't, and you don't have the opportunity to keep digging. But I would suggest a lot of those is exactly what I'm talking about, where you just don't feel good about decisions being made about you or about your department or about the company. And sometimes they're just, it's a life coaching issue based on emotion.
understand. Thank you. And speaking of emotions, you mentioned about businesses that struggle financially. That creates an additional psychological burden. So you're really providing I could say, an invaluable service. I wanted to come back, putting some context to what we have in the UK. So around the smaller businesses, the startups in the UK, we have
Mhm.
this code called Prompt Payment Code. And what that does is it seeks to support small businesses who can be exploited by large customers because they have more authority, more power, more influence, and more financial clout when they're negotiating commercial terms. And also, on top of that, we've had some scandals with large supermarkets who pay, like, say, small farmers and suppliers locally, and they delay those payments way beyond the terms because they can. And so
Yeah.
this code is actually a register that names and shames those larger customers who do those practices. If you're struck off, then that suggests, yeah, you're not a good business partner to be dealing with. So
Mm.
be prepared. Start building that into your pricing, etc., and even offering probably late payment penalties and stuff. But what have you seen in America as the biggest challenges small businesses face when managing or trying to manage their cash flow?
So, number one is understanding it. Everything we've talked about today. The other unfortunate thing that happens is business owners are brilliant, but they're generally technicians with an entrepreneurial itch,
Mm,
meaning they know how to do something really well. They know how to grow fruits and vegetables and livestock in
mm,
that particular situation, or they've come up with something they know how to manufacture really well. They are not in any way, shape, or form finance people, nor should we. I don't think we should expect them to be. So we've got to get past that point where they can actually hire help. It's really tough for the really small business people. It just is.
mm,
But at that point, up until they continue to make cash bank balance decisions. And that's the number one thing. If there's one thing that somebody really isn't paying attention to anything, stop paying attention to your bank balance and set up a budget. And especially for money you're pulling out of the business or you're trying to invest in a new piece of equipment, you've
mm,
got to set up a budget so you don't pay yourself too much or you don't invest in that piece of equipment that in theory will produce returns, but you're going to go broke because you can't pay it back. And that would be my number one suggestion. Budgeting so you're not misallocating money for yourself as an owner or reinvesting too much.
So it all comes back to good old financial discipline and really scrutinizing what you're investing, even your short
Yeah.
term discretionary spend.
Yeah. I mean, I'm working with a lender right now because they want me to teach their borrowers or they're potential borrowers. Some they going,
Mhm.
we would love to lend to you, but you don't know what you're doing. And these are companies that are at least $3 million in revenue. That's about £3 million now. I think we're at roughly
Yeah.
par. It's not a super small company, but these are also 5 million and 10 million beyond. And so
Mhm.
these are okay. These are, employees and they should have decent cash flow. And they're so frustrated because an owner will show up. They know they just got a big order in, they just lent them a bunch of cash in a great big shiny new vehicle, a truck or an expensive sports car. And they know exactly how it was paid for. It was on the money that was supposed to be going in to run the business. And it's a challenge. We all want boys, but we need to have the business to pay for them appropriately.
And it all comes back to that psychology, right? I mean, the owner might be thinking in their heads, it's good marketing to have such a nice car and then flex it in front of the customers. But, you know, the commercial customers would probably think, well, this guy's obviously wasting their finances.
Hey, as far as I'm concerned, you want a sidecar that's sort of old and beat up that,
Yeah.
not too bad, but, 10 years old.
Mm.
Yeah. And drive that to the customers. And you can say, well, our margins are bad. You can't do that in a bright, shiny new vehicle.
Yeah.
I agree with the Dante.
Thanks. And this is such a good conversation, David. One thing I also like, I'm personally passionate about technology. I work
Mhm.
with IT, and in London we have a fintech community. And there was a few years ago, I saw a fintech CEO present that their company service, and they were looking to disrupt payments. And one their business model was using AI to analyze data on large customers like a supermarket, and then offering instant cash to small and medium sized suppliers, obviously taking a small percentage of that transaction and splitting it between both themselves, then the supermarket customer, and also the supplier, and paying them some notional fee for processing the payments. And this could only work if they had enough data, so big enough customers to be able to predict which invoices would be likely approved, etc. So getting that history. And I don't know how much you've been working on that side, but do you? I mean, what have you seen in terms of the role that data analytics plays in the evolution of cash flow modeling? Is there something else you've seen that's interested you?
So we've talked about the fundamentals of mindset.
Hmm.
That's not going to help with mindset. It's not going to help with your bookkeeping. And it's not going to help with the next pillars modeling.
Hmm.
You need to understand how cash is coming in, how cash is going out. It doesn't, this is when you're all the way down to the optimization standpoint
Hmm.
that you say, okay, now we can start optimizing our accounts receivables. Or if
Hmm.
you're the larger, you're the purchaser, we can start optimizing our relationship with our suppliers, because that's what you're really trying to do. You're not trying to pay faster, you're trying to have better relationships. And you've got this third party who's willing to provide financial services. The tech is the analysis, and the fin is they probably have investors so they can float money. I mean, that's what we're talking about. They're a bank.
Hmm. Hmm.
So I think there's a place for it. But if you think that that's going to fix all your problems because you get paid today, you're mistaken,
Hmm.
because I see it all the time. When companies get paid, they make dumb mistakes. I'll give you an example. One of the accountants who's in my program is working with a trucking firm. They get paid once a month because it just doesn't matter why. They get paid once a month and they don't have enough money to do whatever they want to. They need to make it last for a month. And so the accountant has tried to work, it's over a period of 6 months. So, okay, this is your challenge. Wait for me for next month before you do not spend any money.
Hmm.
And after the accountant gave up after 6 months. So it's there are no silver bullets, there or no magic wands that can be waived, that one thing is going to fix everything. And that's one of my concerns. Remember, I talked about those articles that I would
Yeah.
read? The
Yeah.
last one was always buy my product or service, and that's going to fix all your problems. And it's a system that has to be put into place. Fintech is great
Yeah.
and it's going to help, but it's not going to solve the problem.
Thanks, David. I completely agree. And coming back to your point about there being no silver bullets, it's so true. If you make it too easy for people, then they may get complacent and they'll fall into bad habits. They'll lose the discipline, and that's where troubles come in. And as you say in this example you shared, it's about, well, they get one payment, but somehow they're still living hand to mouth, month over month, trying to stretch that payment to get to the next month, and that's a vicious cycle, I can imagine.
So I've worked with companies that we talked about having to have systems in place and the psychology of the business owner, that they would say, okay, this is how much money we need. We need $1 million loan. We need a $2 million loan. Doesn't matter the size, but they haven't put the discipline in place. They get the loan. They do whatever and all of a sudden, loan and credit line, the loan pays off underlying bad debt usually, or higher, more expensive debt. And then there's supposed to be a revolving credit line. But within 1 or 2 months, that revolving credit line is maxed out, and they're making the same dumb decisions they did because they didn't take care of the fundamentals. And now they're deeper into debt because you can go get that stupid money anytime you want to. The high interest rate credit cards or MCA loans or other, I don't know if you have MCA loans in the UK. I hope you don't. They're cash advances off of credit cards, and they pull money out of your bank account every day, whether you have it in the bank account or not. So
Sounds painful.
it is. It is. You're worse off afterwards after you get the loan.
Thanks, David. And yeah, you can end up just paying interest and not much else. Becomes very difficult. And speaking of interest, I mean, over the past several years, as I said before, money was cheap, and then now we're in a recession. We've got high inflation, rising interest rates, monetary policy from the central banks being tightened. So, from your perspective, out of all the things we've discussed, what would be your top 3 actions companies must take on cash flow if they haven't already?
Well, the first one would be set up your model so you understand coming in, going out, and where you're going to be in 3 months. And it's got to be by week, by the way. Unless you're paid once a month, and you pay all your bills once a month, then you can set up a monthly model. But it doesn't work. You get paid every week approximately, and you certainly have bills every week. So set up that. Set up that. That's number one. Number 2 is if you don't have a line of credit, go get one. And if you have one, try to get a bigger one now before you need it. And you're going to say, oh, but the interest rates have gone up. Well, the interest rates were at ridiculously low levels. These are getting back to more normal levels of interest, and you can make your business work. But the issue is you use the credit line as a revolving credit line. You don't get into it. You get into it and out of it and into it and out of it. And you use it as a business tool, not as an anchor. So that's 2. Number 3, I think the relationships that you have with your clients and with your vendors. Why vendors? Everybody learned it during the supply chain issues. So one of the things I said earlier was pay your vendors early, right? Because they might give you a discount. Well, even if they don't, who do you think they want to ship to? The person who pays on time or early, or the person who pays late? So relationships, you call it stakeholders. I would focus on stakeholder relationships, clients, vendors, and then the team within the company. There's so many stakeholders within even a micro business, but as the larger you get, the more stakeholders. That would be the 3 areas: cash flow modeling, get a credit line, and then stakeholder relationships.
Thank you, David. So insightful. And speaking of insights, what's the best piece of career advice you've ever received from one of your mentors?
Out of chaos comes opportunity.
Mm.
So, that's the whole thing, and that's why I remember it. And I've seen it over and over again. When layoffs happen, the people who keep their heads down and keep doing their jobs are the ones who aren't generally impacted. And then there's opportunities for growth within a company when that happens. And I'm mentioning layoffs because that's what can happen during a recession, although at least in the United States, we're not seeing massive layoffs. We're seeing very highly visible layoffs, but there really aren't a lot happening. But what other type of chaos? Yeah, when you're having cash flow issues, there's an opportunity to strengthen your customer list, to tighten up your inventory, to get better relationships with the people you're paying by calling them and saying, "Listen, we might not be paying you right now, but we're always going to talk to you. And can we set up a schedule? It might not be what you want, but we'll do what we can." So there's all sorts of opportunity to do better as a company or as an individual within an organization or outside the organization, because so many people who get laid off actually end up with better jobs down the road. At least that's what I've seen.
And I can speak from experience. That's definitely the case with me.
Well, I can speak from personal experience as well.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's a fact of life, and whilst you feel like it's the end of the world, it's actually isn't. It's a one door closes, another one opens, as they say.
Absolutely. But this is where out of chaos comes opportunities. It's complete chaos. When you lose your job or you're having issues with cash flow within a company, it's so much more chaos than if things are no cash flow issues, right? Or that's where the opportunities come.
Thank you, David. And it's been an amazing interview. I just want to wrap up with two final questions. Do you have a project you're working on right now that you would like to share with the listeners?
Well, it's an ongoing project. So I don't talk about it very much, but in 2018, what I started with was saying I want to teach or help 100 million businesses by the year 2030, which is an outrageous goal. I'm not that kind of outrageous goal type of a person, but it just felt right. I started that in 2018, and it's literally called the Cash Management Project. So it's sort of on a back burner because we're doing for profit, and I'm guessing most of that's going to be nonprofit through free materials, give it away. I don't know how we're going to do most of that, but in the meantime, the projects really I'm working on today is this cash flow advisory certification program that's going to be an ongoing project for a long time to teach other financial professionals, accountants, bookkeepers, and financial analysts, how to work with cash flow. That is a major ongoing project that I have going right now, Dante.
Thanks, David. It sounds wonderful, and I hope I can support it by at least through the show, through the medium, and also through my social media channels. I think a lot of businesses will need it and find it very, very valuable, especially right now. Those businesses that are going through the recession, it will seem very tough, but if they can reach the other side, there's opportunities ahead. So you have to think longer term, but for a lot of people living hand to mouth, it's really about the now, and anything that can provide relief is certainly super valuable. So thank you. And then in terms of yourself, David, where can anyone who's interested find and connect with you online?
Well, there's a couple of ways. LinkedIn, I'm there daily. There's resources there. And then also my website. It's davidsafeer.com. And that's DAVIDSAFEER.com. Oh, I just realized I turned on cashesclear.com. I have to get used to saying that. So cashesclear.com is now working. So that's a little bit easier to remember, possibly.
Well, hopefully they won't have to remember, because I'll make sure they're in the show notes. David, You've been an amazing guest. Thank you very much. This is Business Breaks. You've been listening to David Safir. I'm your host, Dante Healy. And David, thank you again for being on the show.
Thank you, Dante.
This podcast shares experiences and insights gained from business, IT, and digital finance. Hosted by two leaders who have made the leap themselves, this show is dedicated to helping listeners think differently about their career aspirations.